It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So, to kick off 2024, Royal Republic has released a brand new song called My House. And it's not what I expected from Royal Republic at all, because they've done songs such as Tommy Gun, and they've got like a very stripped back, like raw sort of sound. Very like, I wouldn't say that they sort of work with really simple songs, but I think that they thrive doing really simple hooks that are very like funny as well.
I think that they are like a proper rock band, like leaning into the rock and roll part of rock band. Like that's where they tend to live, in my opinion, from what I've heard. And this is them being very, very creative with like pastiching like a sound set. And sort of, I mean, just the guitar tone on this track, My House, is so specific. You know, I know a lot of people would listen and be like, well, it's just a distorted guitar, but it's not. It's like a rat-driven one or like a stacked Marshall. It's like a very, very much Motley Crue-esque sort of guitar sound, and a very 80s metal guitar sound, which is a different sort of sound to what they normally do. From what I remember. Yeah,
and also because they've put like a sort of disco drum beat and sort of rhythm section in here, particularly on the verses, it's sort of like whiplash, because you're going, oh, this sounds very like, Eye of the Tiger, very like, just like 80s rock, montage music at the start, and then it goes straight into almost like Donna Summer, I Feel Love sort of like arpeggio, bass and keyboards with a disco beat. So it's very funny in that way.
Yeah, because they've sort of pastiched a lot of different eras and elements at the same time, because there's sort of this early sort of 2000s indie stroke rock sort of verse part, and then you've got all the guitar harmonizing and like the super chuggy rap style riff for the chorus. So it's like there's a lot going on in this song, and that's why I think it's so fun and creative.
I think there's so much going on in the song you don't realise. Like, it took me about 5 times to listen to it until I realised that the chorus is just my house. That's it. That's the only words. And there's so, particularly if you watch it with the video as well, the video really accentuates like the silliness of the song itself, and they've really played into the unsuspecting hands of having like a really serious start to the video, and then as the video goes along it gets more and more like silly, and they're poking fun at loads of different aspects of like these types of music videos.
Yeah, they are also a very good video band as well. I know some bands struggle to make like videos that are compelling or funny or whatever it is, but Royal Republic really do knock it out the park with a lot of their videos. Very entertaining.
Like, I think my favourite bit of the video is when they're doing like the guitar solo moment of the song, which really isn't a guitar solo. It's more like the build up to a guitar solo.
It's like an anti-solo almost, isn't it?
Yeah. And the entire time all this guitar stuff's going on in like the sides of the mix, it's just slowly panning in at the drummer, and it's just sort of completely ignoring what everybody else is doing. Which really, when you don't really think about it until you start thinking, well, aren't we meant to be seeing the guitarist?
Yeah.
And it's just slowly getting closer and closer to the drummer. And then that's followed up by like a rap, which I did not see coming at all.
No, when at first listen, you're like, whoa, what is that?
And on the video, they've gone to that like camcorded sort of like garage rap thing where they're all sort of like posing in next to a car basically, and they've all changed their outfits to go into those like 80s hip hop or 90s hip hop sort of rap.
It is very much a retro influenced rap. It's not like a modern rap at all, is it?
No.
I think that's why, again, they must have had some very, very specific things in mind when they made this song, because it evokes all sorts of different genres and eras, like all at the same time.
And he's also using like 3 different voices on this track, which is really interesting. He's doing what he would normally do on songs like Tommy Gun and stuff, which is the My House, sort of like the hook line of the song, and a lot of the verses. but obviously the rap is in a very different delivery. And then he's got like this, like proper
a smoother singing style, because he goes for quite a full-on rock sort of. You can really hear his like vocal cords like going for his main sort of singing style, but he's gone for a lot subtler singing style on certain parts of the song. I think to try and lean into that smoother 80s tone that you hear on a lot of like the AOR bands, which is really interesting because some people are really, really good at picking up on these subtleties, like when they're singing. You know, I think just to sing in that hard rock style like he often does takes a lot of like thinking power, because you know a lot of people would just sing in their own voice, or you know, not saying that it isn't his voice, but you know, he's pushing his voice for his main vocal delivery style.
Yeah, and that does a lot, because they always say, don't they, about rock vocalists, it's a very different beast to singing like in any other genre, because they have to put a lot more oomph behind the voice to give it that grit that works with a lot of rock tracks. And that's what you don't think about, I think, a lot of the time. When you're just a listener, you just think, wow, I can't believe that's how his voice sounds. But they have to put a lot of oomph in to actually deliver those lines in that way, even when they're really, really simple, like in the way that Royal Republic deliver some of their hook lines. But yeah, the contrast of his voice is like, particularly when you're watching the video, you're like, that's the same guy?
Yeah,
because you'd almost think when you listen to the song that it's a different vocalist just chiming in for that one line. But yeah, combined with the guitar harmonies underneath it's just very, very interesting. And I think to kick off the year with a lot of like genre mashing, and not from a band that really is used to genre mashing. I don't think I've ever seen Royal Republic go out what I would define their comfort zone is. So to hear him rapping and then doing like guitar harmonies and the bombastic 80s thing is a real surprise. And I'd be very interested to see if other bands was doing things in this sort of nature, because we haven't really had much of a stylistic change or like new genre creation or whatever in 2023, where we normally get them in a decade.
I do agree with that. Like there wasn't, I mean, I think there's definitely some trends that have come out in 2023, especially in like the pop rock sort of standpoint. Like I do think like you cannot deny like what Olivia Rodrigo's done in terms of shifting a sort of a narrative in terms of what pop rock music is. But I think when it comes to bands and more established acts, you know, like following a actual trend. When you think, I mean, it's so easy to look at EDM to see how many people started using like Massive in like rock tracks and started to use the arrangement and the sort of reverse, the drops and the builds and all that with EDM. Like it infiltrated practically every genre, and we haven't really seen, to my recollection, as you were saying, anything like that in 2023. Nothing that has sort of changed the average rules and that have re-established like what it means to write a song. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there definitely seems to be, like you say, with people like Olivia Rodrigo, like a Y2K comeback where the fashion is very much like early 2000s and like even borrowing from a lot of different sort of elements of pop punk, elements of singer-songwriting and stuff in the early 2000s, but also all the visuals that come along with that.
Yeah. I mean, I do think like pop punk has sort of had a big resurgence. I do think that is a thing, but again, that isn't new. Like having established acts and up and coming acts really leaning into that pop punk sound. Some of the bands felt like it was a lot more natural for them to lean into that sound.
Yeah.
In the first place. Whereas, you know, this is a band, Royal Republic's a band that could lean into doing more pop punk effortlessly because they're very adjacent to that genre. I mean, it depends, I suppose, on what your preference is. You may even call them, I'm not sure you'd actually call them pop punk, but they're in that like hard rock. Possibly, if you was that way inclined, you could call them punk rock. But That's
Do you not think
an attitude thing?
They're more in the angrier side of the rock revival sort of territory?
Yeah, I do. I do think that. I mean, what has drawn me with Royal Republic whenever I've listened to them, and I haven't listened to every song by them, so I don't want it to be us generalising them to people who love them, thinking, well,
100%.
we're so wrong. But we've listened, like to songs like Baby and Tommy Gun and heard like songs in passing quite often. So they've been on our radar. So when we saw My House, it was like the cover of Spotify's rock playlist. And it was just like, whoa, we know Royal Republic. Like that's somebody like we've heard of and we've enjoyed some of their tracks before. It was like a big like, oh, that's interesting. What are they doing? And I was very surprised to see them leaning into the 80s thing, because that trend, you keep thinking that you've seen the last of that 80s trend.
Oh, because the 80s revival or sort of like 80s infused nostalgia has sort of been going on for a good 10, 12 years now.
Yeah, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. But I mean, I do think that it has a massive success rate. And at this point, 80s is less of a throwback and it's become more of a genre. It's like, well, we're going to use the synths, we're going to do the guitars. It's like montage music. And that's what I'd call My House as well, in a way. I mean, the video evokes that as well in an amazing way. Yeah. It is very much montage, almost maybe workout montage music for rock fans, because not everybody wants to listen to like 128, 129 dance and house music when they're working at the gym.
You could work out to Tommy Gun or Baby, couldn't you? You could just have that, and you could be like running on a treadmill. It's that sort of tempo.
Because it's fast. Yeah, it's fast, and it can like pump you up slightly. So I think that's. And definitely with My House, like that's Royal Republic, like doing what they do. My House feels like that, but mixed with that 80s cinematic montage. That's how I feel about it.
So, Royal Republic genre-wise, according to the most trusted source on the internet, Wikipedia, is defined as garage rock, alternative rock, rock and roll, and hard rock. Yeah, so this is sort of what we were saying about them being in like that rock revival, sort of rock and roll sort of thing.
But the edge of the rock revival, like that harder, more rootsy edge. That's what you were saying.
Described them as garage rock earlier on, and then I thought, well, I wouldn't say the garage rock, but I suppose they're being called garage rock according to Wikipedia.
They're very well produced for garage rock.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking, because they've got that rough around the edges sound that like you say, you've got that quick, scratchy sort of guitar.
Yeah,
and just driving drums, and you can imagine seeing Royal Republic in a club with like 50 people and them just owning it because everybody's having a great time.
Yeah.
Because they're that type of band where they'd just be screaming directly in your face. You're like in the front row.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's slightly evocative of what like the Hives do in a way.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, in that ballpark.
Yeah.
Signed to Universal though. Did you know that?
Was that from the off?
No, I think they've been on a bunch of different labels. Yeah. So that's probably why they appeared on as the face of.
Are you saying that
Rockface.
they've just been signed to Universal?
No. Well, I would have to double check that.
We might get into fact checking territory, which I don't know if we actually want to go there. But that would be interesting if they've climbed up and
they
up.
started on Roadrunner in 2010.
Okay, yeah.
And then they've moved to Odyssey Music, Capitol, and now Nuclear Blast, which I'm assuming is a subsidiary of Warner. I think they're just actually, let me just read this, right? German record label, and it's like a punk label that they're on at the moment for the.
Is that OMN label services?
No,
it's too complicated now with these
I know. Well, I didn't know whether this was a label that then distributed through Universal or whatever, because there's a lot of like sticker labels, and then there's labels that, like say Muse as a band, they do their stuff and then just give it to a major label. Yeah. So it's one of those things.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, the label side of it affects maybe the marketing. Well, it does. We know it affects the marketing and the possible placements, but it really seems to have not a lot to do with the overall sound of the record anymore. Like, I feel like some of the best produced albums you hear can be completely independent. Sometimes being on a label might be a detractor because it adds like a time element. like a deadline. That
Yeah.
a lot of independent artists, they don't give themselves deadlines, and sometimes that's a bad thing if they don't ever release any music, but sometimes it's a good thing because, where a band like U2 in the 90s would have had to go, look guys, it doesn't matter whether it's finished or not, it's coming out, like on pop. It's more like in an independent scenario there could be like, no, let's take an extra year and finish this. So I think that is the big benefit for the indie labels.
Yeah. I also think it goes both ways because I think sometimes major labels will stifle the creativity of a lot of bands, and you hear a lot of people trying to make an album and they're just forbidden fruit for the label for that artist to make an album.
I think particularly like female solo artists, like they're the ones where they just, I don't know why, they just hold them to ransom. That's why you've seen so many people leave their labels over like disagreements and have, like you say, scandals, because they just don't seem to treat them in a manner that you would expect. I mean, you've signed them to a label and they want to put an album out. I don't see the problem with that, do you?
No.
I don't know if it's a label mindset where they think, well, we can't just let them put an album out. They haven't had a air quotes hit. Well, I mean, what was it like? Bonnie Tyler didn't have a hit till like a 14th album or something insane. Might not have been 14th, maybe it was 8th. But like back in the day, people used to, have albums and albums. I mean, this is still a thing that happens when you look at people like Portugal the Man and Robin Thicke and other people. It's not like unheard of for people to release like a bunch of albums and then have a massive blowout hit record. That's not unheard of even in present day, but I think a lot of people think that it's horrible if people don't release an album and have an instant smash. I mean, now they want the smash to be out before the album even comes out now, don't they?
Yeah, and you do hear like rumours of people being ransomed by pre-releases, that they need so many pre-release sign-ups before they can even release the single.
Which is still crazy to me, because how can you sign up? I mean, it's nothing to do with the song at that point.
As a fan, how can you sign up to hear a song that you haven't heard and say, well, I want to do that? It's like, well, you haven't heard the song yet, particularly if it's by an artist you don't know.
Yeah.
Why would you sign up as far as fans are concerned? But, those are just like rumours and things you hear on the internet or from bands or from interviews. But speaking of interviews, did you see what Liam Gallagher has said recently?
Is this the thing where he was like, nobody wants to be in a band because they're all selfish?
Yeah. He said, nobody wants to be in a band anymore. But I think sometimes I know why they say these sort of things, because they're saying, they're trying to get like a rise out of like the music critics, the music press, but also trying to get in the paper. But also, once again, you're talking about a band like Royal Republic, right? It's a band doing rock, signed to a major label, right? But nobody seems to give them the oomph, particularly when we're talking about UK like radio and stuff.
Well, I think, in my opinion, the UK radio doesn't like playing, I mean, it does play a lot of diverse music from around the world, but it does feel like there's so much good rock music in Sweden. It's hard to ignore. It's hard not to single out Sweden for it, because, they just put out these amazing bands and they come out of nowhere and they're all amazing. And then, I've never heard one of them anywhere on any UK radio station.
Yeah, they're just sort of ignored. You could almost say from the UK press. I mean, you occasionally see the bands like that at Download. That tends to be the main appearance you'll see from most of the rock bands. And then obviously like a lot of the UK papers or whatever, the radio stations, the publicity people, they'll ham up Download for like a few days, and then that'll be done. That's rock's final moment for the year.
What I feel like with Downloads, I feel like people are like, oh, Download, the rock festival. And then you're like, well, who's on? And they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, it just feels like they're largely ignored by the most popular radio stations.
Like by mainstream media, I feel like. Whereas when they talk about Glastonbury, it's like, oh, this person's headlining Glastonbury and this person's headlining this stage and that stage, and Download.
7,000 acts on at Glastonbury. Can you find them? That's the real problem. When I looked at the bill one of the last years,
it can get a lot. It can get a lot.
But yeah, Download feels very much ignored a lot of the time in the press and in like the general sort of stuff. Obviously, there's a massive fan base around Download.
Well, it stood the test of time for a reason, and that's because people like that style of music and people like that festival.
Yeah, and I do feel like there's a lot of bands like Royal Republic that are all big when it comes to Download, but they don't seem to get much publicity or anything from the stuff. That's just my opinion from what I see listening to like Radio 1 and occasional commercial other radio stations like Capital and stuff. I mean, obviously that's not their wheelhouse, but obviously Radio 1 does champion a lot of rock music in quotation marks.
Well, they do, and I suppose when you say it's not their wheelhouse, you're sort of right, because these are counterculture genres, really. Like when we get into the history of it, I don't expect to hear, particularly when it's not like a crossover hit, I don't expect to hear these songs on commercial radio, but I think it would be nice for them to get some representation, because I feel like there's just so much of it. Like if there was one or two, fair enough, but I mean, maybe The Hives is the only band I can think of that have actually had crossover mainstream success.
Yeah, I didn't hear Bogus Operandi on the radio though.
No, I didn't hear that on the radio.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I'm looking forward to hearing more of what Royal Republic are up to with this album, because like I say, Royal Republic's been on my radar, but they've very much flown under it in like me being 100% invested. And
yeah, you've liked occasional songs here and there, and you've been like digging it, but you've never gone out and sat there and listened to the full album like you might normally.
Whereas I feel like My House is the single where I'm like, right, I want to hear this full album. I'd be very curious to see if My House was like that shock factor single, and then the rest of the album sounds like normal Royal Republic, because we've noticed a trend where the first single is like really out there, and then the rest is like, oh well, this is exactly what you expect, which is kind of nice if you're a fan expecting a certain thing from a band.
It is, but then what often happens is all the fans go boo when they put out the first single and then say the album's going to be rubbish, and then the album comes out like, oh no, the album's pretty good. It's like, yeah, but they did that deliberately to get a reaction from everybody. I mean, I always think the 1975 and People, for that as a technique, I mean, that was such a overplay of the hand. I mean,
it had like a guttural reaction from a lot of people, didn't it?
It was like,
no, they can't do this.
It was like the opposite of what a lot of their hardcore audience really wanted. But what did it do at the time? It had a massive reaction to people who hated them. People who hated them were like, wow, that 1975 band's actually good. I didn't think they were good, but now I've heard this, they're good. And then you're like, well, now you've fallen for their trap, because now you kind of like them because of one song that they've done deliberately to get you, essentially. So I think it is an interesting technique when it comes to marketing an album, but I do think that it has a high risk, high reward factor, especially like going to see them live, them opening with People and absolutely terrifying a portion of their core audience.
Yeah, and then of course you had some of the audience there who had got there specifically to see that song, and then it's like, right, sit through your 80s pop rock jams for the rest of the night.
Yeah, it can be slightly jarring in that sense, but I mean, I think if you are really open-minded, it can be really refreshing, because I think one thing that I do really like about the 1975 and bands like them, that experiment, is that you can, if you're really into your music and like your highbrow music, you can actually sit there and listen to them and you can get a lot out of it, whereas maybe your average music fan would be like, I don't get why they're doing this to me.
Yeah, I also find like from a fan perspective, me personally, it often only takes one song to break me as a fan of the band. If I like one song, I'll tend to start to like songs that I previously didn't like by that band. Yeah. Even if I'd made an informed opinion, or sometimes an uninformed opinion on a band from first impressions, I find a lot of the time bands are giving an awful first impression to me, and I go, I don't like that band, and if I would have heard different songs on the album, I probably would have liked them from the start. But instead, whoever picks singles for most bands always picks the worst song for me personally.
Yeah.
And then I go, right, well, I won't listen to that band because I'm not a big fan of that song I've heard on TV or the radio or Spotify even. And then there's gems that I would like hidden around. And the thing is when I hear that song that I like, then I listen to the rest of the album and I go, well, actually, it's not that bad. And now that I like the band a little bit more, a lot of the time it is about likability. If you start to like a band or solo artist, you go, well, what else are they doing? Or and you start to move around. If you're somebody who delves into discographies or somebody who buys physical CDs.
I think as well, it's another thing of, you can make up a lot in your head and you can have a preconceived notion of what a act is. And then if you have a song break that preconceived notion, it's almost like taking the blinkers off and you say, okay, well, I'm going to start listening to this and I'm going to have no opinion. I'm just going to listen to it. I'm going to let the music tell me what I actually think. And I think a lot of the time, as you said, when you start listening to non-singles by bands, you can realise that, oh, they're being pushed as a thing that maybe they're not. And if you listen to the non-single tracks, you're like, whoa, actually, I really like this. And a lot of people can have the opposite effect as well. They can, like the singles, go listen to the non-single tracks and go, oh no, this isn't for me. This isn't my new favourite band. But, I feel like it's rare that the singles and the album tracks all sound the same. Like, a lot of the time, there's a big disparity between singles and album tracks, even in this day and age where the artist and label can try their hardest to say, look, this is the single, and then the album comes out and they say, no, it's not. Because that's sort of what happened to Taylor Swift with Cruel Summer, is that for some reason, that's been picked over so many of her other songs as like the song. And I don't even think it was a single on Lover.
It wasn't, but I think she's sort of leaned into that fan interaction and fanfare for that song. So she's sort of like, by playing it live and nodding towards people liking that song and having
she's acknowledged it
most streamed song. They've sort of like reverse engineered that into a single.
But that's exactly it, though. It wasn't their decision. It's like when some songs gain traction or go viral and they have to like repivot their entire campaign around it. That's something that I suppose was a lot rarer before the days of the internet, and especially before the days of streaming. I mean, we keep saying that the charts are just broken now, don't we, really?
Yeah, I think the problem you have at the moment is if you have a TikTok trend, for example, right? There's two songs that come to mind at the moment, and they're not new songs. Obviously, Shine Down, Sound of Madness has just gone off on one on TikTok for some reason. And that album's doing good numbers in the charts and stuff. For some reason, I don't know the TikTok that it's referring to. But from what the band has said on social media, I can see that song's clearly doing well. So now Shine Down, obviously, are doubling down on talking about the Sound of Madness and talking about, obviously, them being in the charts.
And it's coming up to an anniversary of that album as well, so no doubt they're going to really lean into that.
Yeah, and then another song that comes to mind is Murder on the Dance Floor by Sophie Ellis-Bextor, that apparently she'd never charted in America. According to Billboard, she's first entry in the Hot 100 was last week.
She didn't chart on any of her songs, didn't she?
In America, none.
That's crazy.
So that is crazy to think of, but that's because of a movie sync deal. But if we wasn't using streaming as a primary source, how many people would go buy? Now, obviously, we've seen this in like with like Bohemian Rhapsody.
And it is a thing.
If you use it in a movie, people will go out and buy the CD. In the 90s, that's why Bohemian Rhapsody was a Christmas #1 twice.
Yeah.
Because of Wayne's World. But so with this, I forget what the movie's called, but obviously that's great for her, and it's a great song. Obviously, everybody in the UK knows it really well, but I'm very surprised that
I thought it was a crossover hit. I never, with it being a hit in the UK, I never really thought about America or global.
But I suppose when you think about her brand and her voice and accent,
it's very UK.
It is very English.
But they love that in America.
Well, they do. It's very, I suppose it's what Americans would think of very posh sounding, Queen's English almost. But yeah, it's just interesting. But the charts and obviously we're seeing full albums chart, or we're seeing one artist dominate the entire top 10.
Yeah.
Which obviously, when we're talking about buying physical CDs, a lot of people, you can't print 10 singles to sell. You know, like you can't
distribute like every song as an individual single. Yeah, I don't think anybody actually did, to my knowledge.
Not at the same time. Obviously, you had bands like Def Leppard on Hysteria. They had 7 different singles in like vinyl form, but they rolled out over a few years. And obviously, you wouldn't be able to have all of them outsell every single artist. But obviously, with streaming, you only have to be the most streamed artist in the world, and then suddenly, if your listeners are streaming every song on an album, all of those songs creep up the top 40.
And like half of the top 100 are you.
Yeah, and that's why Republic Records had, I think, over 90% of the top 40 or top 10 at one point. And that's just crazy. Like one label can dominate. But yeah, that's just a little bit on the charts.
Also, the intro, My House, by Royal Republic, is really cool. It's like 25-second, like 80s, like nostalgic intro to warm you in. So if you check out My House, definitely check out the intro as well, because it's really cool when bands do these little ear candy pieces of music.
I didn't realise it was a separate track on Spotify.
Yeah, no, it's a separate track, and I don't know if it's actually even eligible for royalties because it's 25 seconds. I can't remember what.
It's 30 seconds or more.
Yeah, so yeah.
There's no reason for a band to actually put that on Spotify.
That's for the love, isn't it? That's for the love.
The fun of doing it, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been our thoughts on Royal Republic's My House. Listen to the track. We love it. It's a great song. And
it's really good.
Check out the video, because the video is as hilarious as it is cool. So, we'll put down in the Q&As if you've watched it yet. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, and we will see you next week.